Warner Brothers announced The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum. They also have War of the Rohirrim coming out later this year. And screenwriter Philippa Boyens is teasing another project that might be adapted to either live action or animation. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com earlier today. You kind of already get a tease there on what Warner Brothers might be cooking up. So Boyens appeared on the Nerd of the Rings YouTube channel at the end of February, and she was asked about which stories in the appendices would be cool to adapt into other mediums. After briefly discussing the Angmar War between the Witch King of Angmar and the Men of Arnor, Boyens teased a war with dragons was at the top of her list. Let's listen to what she had to say here.
Oh, there's some others in there. That this one in particular, because everyone thinks of dragons as very heated and hot and fiery. There you go. There's a hint.
That's it.
Let's see if anyone gets what I'm meaning.
Yes.
Because there are other types of dragons
and
out
there are wars involving dragons.
Yes, or not necessarily wars involving dragons. There are other types of worms.
Ah, okay. All right. I'm catching what you're throwing. Yeah.
You reckon?
I think so.
Okay. Anyway, I've always thought that's interesting, and actually not outside of the world or the precursors to the Rohirrim.
Yeah.
So
I've
always thought that was an interesting story.
Yeah. I also think,
and also very Tolkien.
Yes. Yeah.
So that is what Philippa Boyens had to tease. I believe she is talking about the War of the Dwarves and Dragons that took place between the Third Age, 2570 and 2589, that drove Durin's folk from the Grey Mountains and to the Lonely Mountain. In Appendix B, Tolkien detailed that in the Third Age, 2570, about this time, the dragons reappear in the far north and begin to afflict the dwarves. In 2589, Tolkien notes that Dane the First was slain by a dragon. If we hop on over to Appendix A, Tolkien provides more details about this war between the dwarves and the dragons. He says, but Thorn the First, his son, removed and went into the far north to the Grey Mountains, where most of Durin's folk were now gathering. For those mountains were rich and little explored, but there were dragons in the wastes beyond, and after many years they became strong again and multiplied, and they made war on the dwarves and plundered their works. At last, Dane the First, together with Fror, his second son, was slain at the doors of his hall by a great cold drake. Tolkien continues, noting not long after most of Durin's folk abandoned the Grey Mountains, Gror, Dane's son, went away with many followers to the Iron Hills, but Thror, Dane's heir, with Borin, his father's brother, and the remainder of the people returned to Erebor. The dwarves prospered at Erebor with the Arkenstone. However, word of the kingdom's wealth would reach Smaug the Golden, and without warning came against King Thror and descended on the mountain in flames. It was not long before all that realm was destroyed, and the town of Dale nearby was ruined and deserted. But Smaug entered into the great hall and lay there upon a bed of gold. So that is what I think Philippa Boyens is teasing. Obviously, there is not a lot to go on there, which allows them to be very, I guess, generous in their storytelling. Obviously, there are a couple characters here. Dane the First, his second son, Fror. You likely have these other characters here. Thror, Dane's heir. Borin, his father's brother. I guess it's his uncle, right? And Gror, Dane's son, would also be involved in this, obviously fleeing from the Grey Mountains. And obviously you have this cold drake. So it could be interesting to see. Obviously this takes place after the dwarves had awakened the Balrog in the Mines of Moria. So you could have an interesting kind of prologue with the Mines of Moria, the dwarves going off to the Grey Mountains, some of them going to Erebor, and then showcasing kind of how the dwarves were mining that area in the Grey Mountains, and then showing the dragons coming in and waging a war against them. Could be a fun war epic with differing battles and showing how the dwarves have to kind of maybe be ingenious on how they deal with the dragons and how they are kind of overpowered by the dragons as well. So could be a fun little story here if they do it right. I feel this is something you probably want to animate rather than do live action with. I just feel like that would probably be the better option there. But let me know what you guys make of this. What do you make of Philippa Boyens seemingly teasing this War of the Dwarves and the Dragons for a potential Lord of the Rings adaptation? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.